Hey Rob, how you doing?
Great, great. Thanks for taking the time to chat.
No, man, thank you so much. So most people out there don't know either one of us. I think we're kind of obscure at the moment. We're kind of in the industry. We've been here for a while. So why don't you tell me a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and where you are currently?
Yes, so originally from South Africa. My name's Rob. I work in film, games, and a little bit of book illustration, as not so much anymore. I'm currently living in New Zealand. I'm working for myself at the moment, and with a partner of mine, we've set up a small art studio, just kind of supplying art source art for gaming, gaming companies, and whatever comes our way. We're still very early days, so we'll see what comes from it.
Amazing. So can you tell me
Yeah.
a little bit about maybe what's the difference between maybe working or living in South Africa now that you've transitioned to New Zealand? What's that like?
So it's a tricky question because there's so many things that I still miss about South Africa. But
Hmm.
saying that, I'm very happy in New Zealand as well. A lot of things seem to work a lot easier here. So kind of administration things and a lot of
Mm.
functionality of systems run a lot smoother in New Zealand than in South Africa. So I do appreciate the kind of, it's a little bit more first world.
Yeah.
But at the same time, saying that, there's a lot of third world things about South Africa that just make it amazing that you only really miss when you're not there. So
Yeah.
it's been a good transition. I came here with my family. I actually started at Gameloft New Zealand. That's one of the
Mm.
reasons we moved out to New Zealand.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's been a good transition, but also yeah, tough as well. It's difficult being in a new place and it takes adjustments, but yeah, mostly really good. And I've still managed to keep a lot of relationships with clients, so I still work for quite a few South African clients as well. So
Mm, mm, mm.
yeah, nowadays the world's very open and connected, isn't it? So like we were saying a minute ago, we're having this conversation, across the Pacific, so
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
pretty easy,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's kind of mind blowing to me that how connected we are now. And I think, platforms like Zoom, their stock shot up with the COVID-19 thing because of,
Oh, absolutely.
people's desire to communicate with family and business is now taking over. So would you say things feel a little bit different now? Like we're starting to transition into a world where there's a lot more viable freelancing opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I haven't met, I'd say 70% of my clients I've never met face to face, So I think when I first started out, it was a much more case of you need to go, I started in a book illustration kind of industry. And you'd need to go to meetings, go to a lot of conferences, and go to the publishers, meet face to face.
Mm,
But, over the years of my career, I've found a lot more, it's making online contacts, and everything's done online now. You don't need to send anything physical or anything like that. So it's a kind of awesome situation, really, for people like us working remotely. And it's definitely, yeah, absolutely improved over the years, for sure.
amazing. So tell me a little bit, what got started, what got you started in art? What is your journey from the beginning?
So I've always wanted to draw and always loved drawing. Even from a young kid, it's just been a passion. But I never really had much of an inkling of the concept art world or entertainment industry as a source of kind of arts career. So after school, I studied fine art, painting and sculpture, and then traveled for a while. And I actually ended up doing sculpture for quite a few years, and then I landed up in the film industry in Cape Town, making film sets.
Hmm.
And then while I was doing that, I was kind of like, I really want to carry on drawing again. So that led me into getting a few illustration jobs for Cape Town publishers.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, it kind of grew from there. We went over to Japan for a few years, and I managed to get more work there. And then
Amazing.
since coming back from there, it's just kind of, yeah, become more of a career as opposed to just kind of scraping by.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm a huge fan of Japan. I went there for the
Me
first time
too.
a couple of years ago.
Oh,
Um,
did you?
yeah, and my wife lived there for 6 years, so she can speak Japanese. So it was amazing
Wow,
to
man.
have like a private tour guide. But where about were you in Japan, like doing that work?
We were in Tokyo. Well,
Okay,
like half an hour out of Tokyo in Chiba.
okay.
Yeah. So
Oh, cool. Oh,
yeah,
that's so rad,
yeah,
man.
man.
Yeah, look, like I'm such a fan, man. It's like I just want to go back there all the time. It's just so mind
Oh,
blowing.
me too.
It's such a
Yeah,
way of
it's
life.
really an incredible. It's like another world, you know.
Yeah, completely.
So where
So
was your wife for 6 years then, if you don't mind me
all over
asking?
the place, man. She was in the south, like in some rural Inaka type places. She was teaching English at the beginning. She went there on the JET program, like many South Africans, many people actually around the world. And
Yeah.
she transitioned into teaching in younger children and things like that around Osaka, and then just around all over the place. We visited
Wow.
most of the places together. It was a lot to take in. She has a lot of friends over there who are
Okay.
foreigners and Japanese. So we got to, my experience of Japan was actually from both sides. It was like as a foreigner and also on the inside. I got to go to like the back of restaurants where like foreigners aren't allowed kind of thing, like
Cool,
and
man.
just see like a
Yeah.
world that is completely different and more exclusive, I guess, which is cool. It's super cool. So yeah, I mean Japan in general, it's a place we honestly talk about it almost daily about going back and checking it out. I may even consider moving out there at some point for a little while. I don't know.
That would be amazing, man. And you know, with her, with having the language kind of barrier unlocked, makes a huge difference as well. You
Huge
know,
difference.
because you
Even
kind of
even
like,
even basic reading. I mean, it's so powerful just to be able to walk around and go, oh, I know what that menu item says or that station, whatever.
yeah,
Look, it's becoming more cosmopolitan now, especially since the Rugby World Cup. But it's still very Japanese. For foreigners to even dream of integrating, you have to learn a little bit. There's almost no other way.
yeah, absolutely,
Yeah. So
absolutely. Yeah.
so to go back a little bit to what you were just telling me now, would you consider yourself a self-taught artist, or did you study formally?
Oh, so I studied fine art for 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
and that was, you know, kind of a bit of the fundamentals we were talking about. So we did
Mm.
painting and drawing, and it was a kind of a broad course, which like funneled down towards the end. So I've kind of majored in painting and sculpture for my last 3 years. But you know, kind of saying that, that was the last formal education I did, and that was a very long time ago now. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just been self-taught since then. And to be honest, like 3 years at a university, I kind of felt that it was. I'm so glad I did it. It was super helpful, but I only really started learning after that. You know, so it was a good
Mm.
step, but it certainly wasn't the end of my learning. More just the beginning.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
I mean, being formally taught at the beginning, would you recommend that for someone today studying and wanting to get into the industry?
You know, I don't really think you need it today. You know, I think one of the things I was kind of thinking about what to say is there's just so much information out there nowadays. You know, whether it's courses like your own or schoolism or even just online YouTube is just this huge wealth of information. You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so and that certainly wasn't around a couple of years ago. So I think all of the information is out there. It's more just being able to find it and kind of access the right teachers.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I chat to young students all the time who tell me they're just learning on their own through YouTube, and I'm amazed to see that they're able to create some kind of system for themselves to level up in that space. Obviously, I have my own opinions about education. I do think that there are different ways of going about it, but certainly, like for as a beginner, someone who's never touched art before, or maybe has a high school level of art and is interested in art, there's just a wealth of knowledge to improve on that base level skill.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you can find the most specific thing, although it is a bit time consuming. It's like really amazing. You can, find the most specific little skill, and there's someone who's taken the time to, do a tutorial. It's incredible, actually.
Absolutely, it's mind blowing. Like the detail of information. Not to mention, when I was in college, there was like a handful of softwares and 3D softwares that we were using. It was like 3D Max, Maya, and Photoshop, basically, and maybe Blender was starting to come up. But now it's like, hey, there's all this other tertiary software for texturing, for lighting, for compositing. Like it's incredible. Like there's packages everywhere. In fact, I think there's almost an option overwhelm now in a way. Whereas before
Yeah.
it was like, I think if I just do this one thing, I'll be able to like get it, get in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So it can be a little confusing. I get it. But, I think the base skills, the fundamentals, they don't change, thankfully.
No, exactly. It's kind of, yeah, the kind of building blocks for everything, and then can finesse on top of that.
100%. So I want to jump into taking a look at some of your older art. I think a lot of people out there have a misconception about professional artists as they're just born with talent and they jump into the industry straight away out of the womb, just shot into the industry. And that's definitely not true. I think the majority of people I know are terrible at the beginning and aren't very good at all.
Yeah.
And so we're lucky enough to have three of Rob's oldest, let's call it, art pieces here. So I'm just going to share my screen with
Oh,
you
let me
guys.
even clarify. There's much older and much worse work than this as well. I have to
Yeah,
put it out there.
yeah, we'll put it out there, promise. We'll make it public. All right, so here we go. I'm gonna just jump in here. We can zoom in because some of these images are unfortunately low res, but this is what we got. Okay, we got some old illustration. Want to run me through what this was and what you were thinking?
So this was when I was in Cape Town. I was in the film industry, and I was really trying to get into children's book illustration more. So I'd kind of come up with a few of my own stories, and I'd spend my evenings or weekends kind of working on these illustrations. So it was just a little story about a little girl and her dog.
Mm-hmm.
I think this one was, yeah. So I actually really love doing them, and I do have fond memories of them. But looking back, yeah, the skill level is a bit lower than I would like,
Yeah, and it's so interesting to see an artist's old work because with the context of, yes, maybe the skill wasn't there, but there's so many things that we still carry through in our art. I don't know if it's like a natural inclination towards certain things aesthetically. For example, I see a lot of your saturated blues here in the sky being reused in some of your latest artwork, and I think like that's so cool that you kept that love for deep blues, in your work.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Another interesting is these are all. I used to really. I mean, I still enjoy colored pencil, but I hadn't done any digital art at all up to this point. So it's got a different look about it as well, doesn't it? The colored pencil stuff.
Yeah, and you get a lot of texture as well, actually. Not only from the paper, but the medium itself. Yeah, very cool. Okay, so let's jump back here. And I want to ask you, in your opinion, what had the biggest or who had the biggest influence on your art?
Yeah, so I think I was kind of thinking about that, and one of the things for me has actually been I never did much 3D stuff. It was always just digital painting, 2D.
Mm-hmm.
But learning 3D more recently has made a huge difference, actually. Like it's with programs like ZBrush and a bit of Blender, and I used to use a bit of SketchUp as well, and painting over 3D models where you've got a lot of the lighting issues solved. And that I find it really like pushed up my kind of output really like in a really good way, and kind of helped you to think about things in a 3D way. So yeah, I'd have to say that as something that had a big noticeable change from my side. Yeah.
Okay, so do you feel like 3D has improved the speed and the accuracy? Because obviously, like you said, the lighting issues have been solved. I mean, I hesitate to tell youngsters to learn 3D as well as 2D. I often say, maybe it's better to get a grounding first before you jump into that kind of stuff. Do you feel that way?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think both. As we were saying just now, fundamentals are exactly that. It's the basic building blocks which you have to have. And I think to just learn 3D and skip all of the things like perspective or kind of, composition, proportion and that, I think you kind of leaving a building block out of a pyramid that's going to fall down at some stage, So definitely I agree with you. Have your fundamentals there, but to have it as a, for me, I ended up doing painting and sculpture. And for me to combine the two in a way has been really like a great step, because I do like to think, and I think a lot of artists do think in a 3D way. So to be able to take that form that you're painting, but, kind of turn it around in that as well, in your head as well as on a screen is pretty awesome.
100%. And I find that I use 3D sometimes in my work, depending on the complexity of the image I'm trying to build. If I'm building a very complicated image, I tend to use 3D to solve a lot of early problems as well. But I also noticed that no matter how much 3D you use, you always have to come back in and fix problems. And it's so much easier to know what's going wrong in an image because you can lean on those fundamentals and your early experience as an artist to say, oh, if I want to add to this design, I don't like the way the 3D has turned this form or added this giant piece of geometry. Maybe I can come in here by hand and start to paint that out. As a concept artist or as an illustrator, that is the power we have to push maybe a light or a color or a shape even further
Absolutely.
than what a program can just spew out.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And, you know, I think to just negate what I've been saying as well, I think sometimes it can be a real kind of a negative crutch as well. So, you know, you can lose something that you've created, like a really cool sketch or something that's really got a lot of life. And you end up trying to make it into something 3D, and it can actually lose a bit of that energy as well, you know. So it's something that can be negative as well as positive, you know, especially, well, for me anyway, I find.
Yeah, absolutely. I find exactly the same thing. Ooh, I think I lost your camera.
No, you
All
know
right,
what?
we're
It's
back.
just, sorry, just closed for a sec there, huh?
Oh, no worries. So I see a lot of your work is actually moving much more into illustration type stuff. Is that because of your early experience in illustration and it kind of led you up to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, I do love, you know, a story that tells a picture.
Mm,
So I think that is, yeah, I think like that is really, if you can really tell a story and kind of really share just a world in an image, that's something I do really like to do.
yeah,
So I think that's maybe always been there.
yeah,
But yeah, I do love that, yeah, that kind of illustrative approach, and something that really, you know, those images that really, like, you look at it and just go, ah, and you can spend a long time kind of delving into it. I like to do something like that. Yeah.
yeah. I'm exactly the same way. I love a detail-oriented, story-driven image. And I look at your portfolio, and you know, I'll probably just splice it over some of our talking points here. But
Cool.
it is incredible to see first of all, the level of quality coming through your work, but also just seeing the variety in not just illustrative work, but concept development work. And both seem to tell a story. Like even your concept work, you know, it has enough detail in it that is suggesting story elements and things like that. And that might even be because, you know, the IP that you're working on has been delivering you such great ideas and so much good story that you can run with it as an artist.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that is often the case, and sometimes, you know, you can add your own stuff in as well. So even if it's concept work, I mean, people really love when you can put a bit of your own voice into what you're doing. Although there's a directive, to be able to embellish that is really, people love it, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, could you tell me a little bit about why you decided to partner up and get into an independent art production studio?
Yeah, so this is it's really, at this stage, we are just kind of testing the waters.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was at Game Loft about 3 years ago, the best artist there, the hotshot artist, is this guy. His online name is Gabaleps, and he is a beast. He is such a good artist, and I've always been, you know, blown away by his work. So
Mm-hmm.
about a year ago, one of the companies, actually a South African company I've been working for, they were expanding, and they said, look, we're looking for another artist. Do you know anyone? I said, if you're lucky, this guy might be interested. So he kind of joined on, and we've been working a little bit for this company together. But we've been speaking about, you know, these guys are really great clients,
Mm.
and there's going to be other great clients just like them out there. You know, it's a big world and a big industry. It's mainly for, at this stage, it's gambling, you know, the slot
Mm-hmm.
games.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been doing all the assets and backgrounds, and super fun work. So we'd like to try and expand a little bit from that, you know.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
as I say, it's super early days, and we really don't know. We don't know what the results will be. But yeah, we're just kind of putting something together and seeing if there's any response.
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be a massive response. It's sometimes things are slow before they're really fast. And I think
Yeah.
looking at the quality that you guys are putting out, and I'm going to overlay some of that studio work as we're speaking here so people can take a look.
Oh, cool.
It's really, really amazing stuff that I'm seeing already being put together. It's such a professional presentation. And you can see the power of the work, absolutely. And not just to work in slot, games, but also games, maybe even film, animated features. Who knows how far you're going to go, but the work speaks for itself that you're capable of taking on all those different types of projects.
Yeah, cool. We'll see. We'll see what comes of it, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited for
Yeah.
you. It's so great to see a journey from the beginning. That's like one of my favorite things.
Well, thanks very much for the encouragement. I
Well,
appreciate
absolutely, man. I'm going to be your biggest fan, I promise.
it.
So tell me a little bit about, without naming any names, do you have any nightmare client stories that you can share with us?
So, I've been thinking about it, and
Mm,
I must be very lucky. I haven't had really negative, terrible experiences. Like the only thing is that I have to say is there's the nightmare clients, and it's not one person. It's just that client who doesn't actually know what they want, but
mm.
as soon as you do something, they can tell you that they don't want that.
Oh,
And
that's so
that's
good. Yeah.
there are a couple of those around, and those are the only ones that I really like. I feel so lucky to be doing something that I love and getting paid for it.
Yes.
But every now and again, you come across those clients, and those are the only nightmares I've really
Yeah, they
experienced.
make you question everything.
Exactly, man, exactly. And they like,
So
I
good.
mean, it's so frustrating because they don't have a visual idea really. They'll give a very bland brief, and then they'll just say, no, no, that's not it,
Yeah,
and not really give you any further help. So
yeah,
it's stabbing around in the dark.
absolutely. So earlier you mentioned that you did some fine art education. Did you walk away from that with a degree?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It was actually, well, it was a diploma actually. So it
All
was
right.
in Natal Tech in Durban. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And did you find that that diploma was at all useful, that piece of paper, in working in the industry?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all, man. I mean,
Okay.
I used it. I used it when we went to Japan to get a teaching job
Well, there you
to
go.
teach English.
Yeah.
To
So
teach English. So that was actually how useful it was. It said I've never been asked for a single. People don't ask. They look at your work and that's it.
yeah,
I
thank
don't
God.
think there's
Thank
anyone
God.
who asks
Yeah.
for it. Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. I mean, it's like just a piece of paper. I don't even think I have it anymore.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
could you walk me through a little bit about your process? I think a lot of people don't really know how professionals go about either freelancing or working within a studio. If you're in a studio or even in the capacity of working for a remote client and they send you a brief or give you a brief in the morning, how do you interpret that brief and how do you start to produce the artwork and what is your process?
So yeah, it's pretty much been the same for me over the last few years. It'll just so clients or I was working in a film studio a while back. Director will come and he'll kind of say, this is what we have in mind. So just kind of a brief description of what they're looking for,
Mm-hmm.
and then I like to give as many options as you can. So I would do some rough sketches, very rough, maybe small thumbnails, just kind of detailing. Say, for example, it was a kind of interior scene or something like that. Very rough sketches, maybe just showing a bit of lighting or
Mm,
trying to get a slight little bit of mood, but very small, very fast.
mm,
And then take that to them and give them a couple of options and let them choose. I think they often clients and anyone really appreciates having a couple of choices. So
yeah.
once they've done that, then flesh it out a bit more, maybe add a bit more detail, and I'll do a few color thumbnails again, and those
Right.
can be quick but really fun. You can just do crazy colors and really try to do something that really sells it.
Absolutely. And looking through your portfolio, I see so much color work. It's a treasure trove.
Yeah, cool.
Awesome. So, if you can think back a little bit to your early experiences, maybe even shifting around different types of jobs, your education, like who do you think had maybe an influence on your art as a person? Like, was there anyone that you worked with that really challenged you?
Um, yeah. So I mean, my it's a terribly funny story. But in high school, my mom started at the school as the art teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very difficult time for me to have my mother hanging around school as a teenager. But that was one of the first influences. I have to give her credit. She's been an artist as well, so she's kind of been, an inspiration for me. The high school thing, I was very unhappy about at the time, but I'm still only slightly bitter now. So I'm being able to move on from that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think, influences of other people, there've actually been so many,
Mm-hmm.
like, I mean, I often find when I'm in a studio or in proximity, I was talking about this guy, Gabaleps, and a lot of other people, I find this weird thing where I see their work and I'm so intimidated by how good they are. Like I really feel almost, oh, geez, I lose a bit of confidence, and then lately I find if I can turn that around and really use that as inspiration, and I
Mm.
do that with as many people as I can find, it can be really powerful, So I kind of like take that as, well, he's so good, like, but I just want to, like, that's how good you can potentially be, So
Right.
I use it as a step more than a kind of something to trip over. But
Absolutely.
yeah, he's been a big influence, Gabaleps, and I mean, I can't really name specifics, but at every place I've been, there's been a lot of really inspirational people that,
Mm.
working with them has really been able to level up my own work as well.
Mm. Mm. And would you
Yeah,
say that maybe some of the advantage of being in-house is that you have that artist right next to you and you can kind of look at what they're doing
yeah,
and get the immediate feedback of the direction they're going in the particular project, and it might influence the way you move. Whereas maybe if you're working remotely, you're not 100% in touch with that vibe that's happening.
absolutely. I think that's like a big plus of being in the studio.
Mm.
And also from a learning point of view, if, for example, I'm working at home and I'd like to try learn some technique, or I need to go online, kind of search for that, find something that works, maybe watch one or two tutorials that are really awful or whatever.
Mm, mm,
Whereas
mm.
if you're in a studio, you can just turn to the guy sitting next to you and pick up something in a second. So
Yeah.
it's really, it's such a faster, more interactive way of gathering kind of skills.
Yeah, absolutely. And I
So
think, yeah, just I mean, having an art director right there as opposed to maybe the next morning, it's so powerful to just say, "Oh, don't
yeah,
do that," like,
yeah, it makes a huge difference, huh?
yeah, yeah. So, a lot of the time I think, mistakenly confuse an artist and their artwork as being the same thing. We say, "Oh, look at that person. They live, breathe, and drink their art, and that's who they are." And sometimes we feel that way as artists. We feel like what we're putting on the page is a part of us, and it has this, I don't know, raw creative energy that is spewed out from inside us onto the page, and it just, you can't help but identify a little bit with who you are with that art piece. And so that's why I think a lot of artists feel a little like down when they produce something less than they possibly could for a particular project or whatever it might be. Or maybe
Yeah,
the next morning you look at an art piece you were really proud of like the previous day and you go, actually it's not as good as I thought. And then you
that's the
start to feel
worst.
like I need to move on, and all that sort of thing.
That's
So
the
so
worst.
in order for us to understand a little bit more about you as an art, as a person, not really necessarily a person who produces art, could you tell us a little bit about what excites you outside of art? What do you like to do? What do you like to spend your time on?
Yeah, so it's I mean, for me mostly it's family at the moment.
Mhm.
So I've got my wife and we've got a young little kid, and so the rest of my time actually goes to family.
Mm.
And we've bought a really old house, so everything's kind of in a state of disrepair. So the majority of my time is taken up with hanging out with family and fixing an old creaky house. And we're in New Zealand in the middle of winter at the moment, so there's holes in the walls and stuff. So high priority is just getting the house a bit more sorted. But
100%.
yeah,
And that's such
saying
a
that,
that's a hobby, man. Like you've just given yourself like a 2-year hobby.
I wish it was 2 years, man.
Yeah,
I wish it
exactly.
was 2 years. Yeah,
I'm being
it's
very
probably going to be
optimistic.
5 years ago.
I'm like, I'm trying to push you to finish the house. Finish it. Awesome.
Yeah, it's a long job,
Um,
but it's fun, and yeah, I do love it. So
yeah, yeah,
yeah, I
that's
feel
amazing.
pretty lucky, you know.
Yeah. So obviously with creative, with your new studio, I think that there's a lot of ideas, mulling around in your head and stuff like that. If I could just wave a magic wand, do you think you could come up with like an ideal client that you'd love to serve and work with, like maybe next month?
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about that as well, and like I think if I had to say what ideal thing to do, I think it would be to be creating our own kind of concepts or IP, or something
Mm,
totally belongs to us that we sell to other
mm,
people, as
that's
opposed
amazing.
to
Mm,
someone asking us what to do. I would love to be able to create our own concepts in that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And would you be open to working with more artists to develop something that you started, maybe like way down the line to expand on an idea?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, that would be amazing.
Yeah, amazing. And then, get the right pitch in, maybe to Weta since you're in New Zealand, you never know.
I,
Never know.
you never know. Dude.
That'd be cool. All right.
Yeah, that would
So,
be the dream.
how would you specifically describe artistic success?
Yeah, I think personally, it's
Mm,
it's it's a case of, for me, success would be firstly what I am doing. So it's really doing what you love, and
mm,
still making a living from it. To me, that's something that I've always aspired to do. So I feel very lucky that I'm able to do a job that you really enjoy, and still get paid for it, really, or get paid for it all is great.
absolutely.
But then I think as a success, yeah, I'd like to get some recognition would be really cool, and to
Hmm.
kind of leave something behind that's,
Mm,
that people remember, or maybe 10 years from now, someone sees a picture and goes, oh, that's pretty cool. I think I'd be happy with that, really. The
yeah,
world's moving so fast, and everything's just getting covered in more stuff.
it's
So even
true.
if you
Like,
can leave a little bit of something behind, that would be cool.
I agree. I think every one of us gets to a certain point in our life, maybe a later career, I would say, where you start to ask the question of what am I leaving behind? Who am I helping along the way? And
Yeah.
and how can I expand myself in order to meet that?
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's a really tricky thing, though, because
Mm,
there's just like, it's very hard to leave anything, really.
mm. Yeah, I
But
mean
I,
it's
I do think, yeah, sorry,
no after you.
I do think, like, if you can, well, sorry, uh, sorry, if you can leave something that's, yeah, that kind of leaves an impression on anyone, I think that's really cool. As an artist,
Mm, mm.
I think that would be a really cool thing to be able to do.
Yeah. Do you believe in the butterfly effect? Like if you produce something or touch something that, it expands and kind of influences the culture of the art?
It makes sense. It
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right.
How about
So,
you?
definitely, I think that it's impossible to imagine working on the kind of projects that you and I do and not have that project influence someone out there. Even if it's
Yeah.
to make them happier for 5 minutes, and then that has a ripple effect on their entire life, that's extremely powerful. Not to mention the fact that maybe your artwork is so great that it inspires someone to even pick up a pencil. I mean, that in itself, I feel is a worthy ideal.
That's very true, man.
Yeah. And you never know. Like, I think a lot of the time, artists, we live in this, like, there's a lot of self doubt around getting good as an artist and producing artwork. And I think that we often forget how the smallest thing we do can have a bigger impact.
I like that.
Mm. So, based on your own experience, do you have any advice for young artists who want to break into this industry?
So, as far as breaking in, I don't actually know. I think it can be really tricky to do. And I think the only thing I would say is, you just have to work as hard as you can at it, learn as much as you can, but also it's a lot comes down to people.
Mm,
People are actually, it's like contacts and connections, and being able to, if you do get a client, do your very best, and
mm,
be as personable as you can make a huge difference as well. Like a lot of my work, it's just been it hasn't been from like a kind of a blind connection. It's been someone else who's recommended me, or you know that person who says this job's available, and word of mouth, and kind of second or third degree of connection makes a huge difference as well with trust.
Absolutely. I almost
Yeah,
feel like you and I got to work on a feature film together briefly, and we touched base maybe like once, twice a week on that project. And ever since then, we've kind of not really kept contact, but there is a fond memory of having worked together to the point where it's like, well,
absolutely,
maybe Rob and I can work on something in the future. Like it suddenly comes to
absolutely.
mind where it's like, hey, there's this connection you made, and it's a real connection, even though it was so brief, and yet the potential to carry that connection forward can be so large. It can be grand, in fact.
Yeah, absolutely. And nowadays with LinkedIn and so many other ways of connecting, all those threads are still tied. So it's very easy to find someone after 2 or 3 years, or however long it's been with us, and that.
Absolutely. So, Rob,
Yeah,
I just want to say thank you so much for this interview. I hope that it helps the people out there who are going to be watching it, namely my students, my mailing list, perhaps. And I hope that we get to put this maybe even on YouTube, have a few people on there take a look. This is obviously the first interview I've conducted, and I
cool.
really enjoyed it. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for making the time today. I know it's starting to get late in New Zealand, but yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, man. And yeah, I hope that makes any sense from my side, but really appreciated chatting to you, man.
Oh, thank you so much, Rob. Have yourself a wonderful day.
Sweet, bro. Chat soon.
Chat soon. Bye.
Yeah.